Okay, hi guys. I know people are joining the webinar here. We'll just wait a minute or two for a few more people to join. And once the attendees list kind of settles down, we'll get going. Okay. And it looks like we've settled down. So I'll very quickly introduce myself. I'm Anne Wright. I'm a lecturer in creative computing. Some of you may know me, and others may have had emails over from me the last couple of days. We have here, so I will be your host for today. And we have here with us Gareth Cullen from Dell and Michael Guerin, who is from Smart Dublin - kind of Smart Docklands as well. So the idea of today is it's more of a question and answers. You'll know there, you'll see on your panel that you'll be able to type in questions. So feel free to type in questions whenever you have one for Gareth or for Michael, or indeed for myself. But in the meantime, we'll start the discussion going by me asking Gareth and Michael a few questions. And I'm sure from that, a few other questions will arise from yourself. So please feel free to, direct this panel is for you guys. So you want it to go in the way that you actually want. You want to get out of it what you need out of it. So please make sure that happens by asking the questions that you actually want from these guys. So we'll start. I believe you should know Gareth and Michael from their bios. So I'm going to just get straight into it. So Gareth, if I start with you and ask you to tell me a bit about the industry you're in, please.
Yeah, hi Anne, hi everybody. So my name is Gareth Cullen. I'm the Talent Acquisition Director for Dell in Ireland. And the industry that represents basically is the technology industry. So, what I would say in terms of an opening just is it's a very fast-paced, changing type environment. We'll get into the skills that are associated with that as we go through the webinar, but a very fast-paced type changing environment. When I look to the future, I think it's a very exciting one. When I look to the problems that we as a society need to fix, I think a huge amount of them, if not all of them, rely on a significant technological input to part of that solution, right? So what I would say is it's a very innovative space. It's a very problem orientated kind of, hey, we got to go fix problems type feeling to the industry. It's very fast, it's very innovative, it's fast changing, it's push the plane off the cliff, let's build it on the way down type of culture, right? As opposed to let's have everything absolutely perfect before we go roll out a solution type culture. So a lot of focus on agility, being flexible, learning mindset, being able to download skills, that type of environment. And the last thing I'd say is probably from a diversity perspective, I think it couldn't be more important than it is now, because what the whole industry is trying to do, and what we're trying to do from a Dell perspective, is increase the level of creativity and innovation all the time, right? So that requires a certain openness in terms of bringing different skill sets and different opinions and different expertises to the table. And that's one of the things that I'm particularly motivated by when I think about the landscape, right? Because there's this be yourself and bring that self to the table, which is the bottom line in terms of increasing innovation and productivity. And so I think it's probably more open, more cool than it has ever been. And I'm motivated by that diversity of thought. And I think we need to continue to build on that. And then I think the technology sector can be a huge empowering industry for what we want that society of the future to look like, essentially. That's it.
Great. Thanks, Gareth. It's I'm glad I hear you mentioning diversity there, and I'm a big one for advocate for encouraging young girls, more women into the tech industry, because you mentioned diversity in opinions, and we have a different type of opinion and a different way, something else to bring to the table. So yeah, very important that diversity in all shapes or forms, not just gender. I know that's what I'm mentioning there. Michael, have you anything to add to that in terms of the industry you're in?
Yeah, so thanks, and nice to meet you all. I lead the Smart Docklands program in Dublin, so to give some context of what that is, so you know who I am. Smart Dublin is an initiative of the 4 local authorities in Dublin. So the idea is that we want to bring more technology into Dublin to solve city problems. So things that you might see, and you may certainly have seen in the last couple of years, is bike sharing schemes like Bleeper Bike and Moby Bike. The likes of Dublin Bikes have obviously been around for a lot longer. So we work on a lot of transport and mobility things. We also do a lot of IoT and sensing, so to try and address environmental challenges, so things like flooding and air quality, using IoT sensing to address that. And then we do a lot of things around 3D modeling. So for 3D modeling of new buildings using AR and VR. So what we'd like to see in the city at a point in time is maybe that you would put on a VR headset or use augmented reality to understand what a new building will look like in the city before it's built or developed, or potentially even that the city operatives would be able to use an augmented reality application and see the utilities under the road before they dug the road up to reduce any issues that they might have there. So as Smart Cities cuts across a huge range of things. It cuts across a lot of different industries. You know, the goal of the Smart Docklands program and the Smart Districts program we've now set up. So Smart Docklands was established in 2018. The idea was we wanted a fast-tracked innovation test bed for people to trial and test new technology and new solutions. So anybody listening today that's tried to work with a local authority before, they will know that it's really difficult to do. It's really difficult to get your foot in the door, and it's difficult if you have a solution. You know, some of the companies that we're working with have developed solutions, as an example, small IoT sensors that you'll put in a gully. They'll let you know if the drain is blocked, and it reduces on-street flooding. That all seems quite simple, but trying to get the right person in the city to work with you to put that sensor in the drain is actually quite difficult. So what we've set up is a test bed where you can access those people and access those assets to trial and test new technology. So I suppose we work with a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of startups, and we also work with a lot of big tech companies like Dell, like Google, like Facebook. Sometimes it's on hardware-based things, sometimes it's much more software. But what we try to do is give people an opportunity to trial and test new technology. So what we're seeing now is certainly a move towards a lot more data-driven decisions in cities, and that's kind of what smart cities are all about. So you know, we're working with a lot of very interesting perspectives on, you know, how cities were run and organized previously was a lot on that's the way it was always done, but we're starting to see things change now. So anybody, obviously, if you're in IADT and if you've been in Dunleary town recently, you'll have seen the new cycle paths that are there, a significant change in the city. We'll also see bus connects happening soon. We may see e-scooters legalized in Ireland pretty soon. So there will be significant changes in Ireland. You know, there certainly was in the last 12 months, and there will be in the next 12 months. And what we want to try and see is that any decisions that are made are data-driven decisions from that, not just, I suppose that's the way it's always been. And COVID is to shine a spotlight for us on the ability for local authorities to change quite considerably in 12 months. I think, you know, we probably would never have said that all local authority staff could work from home and that we'd make Dunleary one way and put in a two-way cycle track. People probably would have said it would take 20 years to do both of those things. They both happened in the last 12 months. So I suppose it's shone a light on our ability to move much faster if we want to.
Great, thanks very much, Michael. Yeah, and I know the cycle track well, obviously.
Yeah.
Very good. So I'm going to move on to skills and ask both of you, with Gareth, I'll go back to yourself, give Michael a break. The key skills that any of our graduates will need from the industry. I noticed when you were talking previously, you were talking about, you know, fast-paced, flexible, and so on. So those kind of, they're more softer skills as opposed to proper techie skills. But yeah, go for it, Gareth, and let us know what sort of the key skills should they have.
Yeah. Hey, Michael, by the way, cool stuff, right? I love hearing all that stuff that you're working on. It's fantastic stuff. I heard somebody explain this recently. Actually, my boss said, you know, I don't think there will be skills of the future, right? Apart from soft skills. And I would align to that probably about 95%, right? I think there obviously will be skills that are needed in certain areas, right? If you want to be a program manager, maybe something like PMP, you want to be a coder. then obviously you got to be able to code, right? But I really do believe that a huge amount, what do I mean by a huge amount? You know, back, show my age now, but 15 or 20 years ago, I probably would have estimated that about 20% of your job relies on soft skills to be successful, and then for lesser back, maybe about 50%, and now I've stopped reviewing it, because every time I think I have an answer, I realize it's actually a bigger percentage, right? It's like 85, maybe 90+% relies on your soft skills. What do I mean by that? Firstly, the ability to be flexible and adaptable and agile is key, right? We've just talked about the extent and the pace of change. And so your ability to be able to react to that change on a sixpence, pretty much, change of direction, variables that we didn't anticipate. Michael talked to some of them there, right? You're working your way through a program, you can't anticipate everything. So the learning mindset in terms of being flexible, reacting in the right way, is critical to the success, right? The second thing I'd say is business/commercial acumen. No matter what your job is, you got to have an appreciation of the fact that there has to be some business or commercial output to a particular venture, right? If you're a software engineer, you need to understand that ultimately you're trying to produce something which has output or impact X. And so just, to sit in a corner and get on with your job is kind of not good enough anymore. You got to plug into a bigger thinking, a bigger picture, which leads me to my third point, which is a huge focus on relationships. Everything is relationship based, right? You gotta network, you gotta talk to people, you gotta be curious, you gotta ask questions. I have a philosophy about buying people coffee, right? I insist on buying people coffee because every time I buy someone a coffee, I find I learn something. Now I'm buying virtual coffees at the moment, which is not quite as cool for everybody else, and actually more economical for me. But the concept remains, right? You got to reach out to people, not just when you have work to do with them, but generally reach out, be curious. What are your barriers? Where are you trying to get to? What are the key opportunities for you? Try to build that relationship and build networks. And through the other side of that, then you will have mentors, you will have advocates, you will have people who would advocate for you and understand you and help along your journey, right? And the last thing I'd say, and Michael touched on it as well, right, is problem solving. You got to have a culture that is excited by the problems, right? How people react to problems is pretty much one of two ways, right? You can see a problem and go, oh, we got a problem here, and geez, we've got to get her, and it spirals downwards, right? Oh, we all get negative about it. Or, oh, there's a problem. Let's get interested. Let's go fix this. Let's go work it into an opportunity. And so in chaos, there's always opportunity. In problems, there's always opportunity. You got to have a mindset to this stuff that says, I'm able to download whatever hard skills I need, but the application and making those things a success, making those learnings a success, is hugely dependent on the application of the soft skill that you put around that. Relationships are a good example. If you're getting things over the line, driving a particular program, getting it there, but leaving a trail of blood behind you, nobody's going to want to work with you. You got to produce relationships that are ultimately productive to everybody, and we win together type environments, right? That's the big change as we move forward from where we are. Tradition, in terms of just getting stuff done, is not good enough anymore. I heard a fantastic quote at the Simmons conference some years ago by a lady who ran for president of Finland, I think it was. I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she said, business as usual is just not good enough anymore. And that goes back to the whole diversity thing, right? So with that, I'm going to shut up because Michael has bits to add to this, I think. But that's what I would say in response to that question.
Great, Gareth. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, I don't call problems. They're not problems, they're challenges. It always sounds a bit better. And I'm glad to hear you're talking about relationships and so on, and networking and getting to know people at all different times and so on. I know with all our students in the Faculty of Fact anyway, we get them, no matter what program they're working on, or that they're studying, they get to work with other students. So our psychologists will be working with our Viscom could be working with the computing could be working with guys in film and art and so on. So yeah, we're trying to get that skill into them from very early, from first year and in second year. They will do an elective. The elective subject that they have to choose has to be outside their comfort zone. So computing could, you know, do psychology. The psychologist could be doing something in film or art and so on. So that's the idea behind those subjects that we teach here in IADT. So Michael, apologies, I'm butting in there, but it's about yourself. The students can talk to me anytime they want. So yeah, have you anything to add to that about the skills in industry?
Yeah, so I suppose, I mean, I couldn't agree more with everything Gareth just said, to be honest with you. You know, in a way, it's kind of taken for granted that the hard skills will be there, and, you know, people that coming out of IADT will have those hard skills, the soft skills, and it's maybe not necessarily the right, you know, hard and soft skills maybe isn't the right way to frame them, but the soft skills are extremely important. So, you know, Gareth has touched on almost all of them there. Your communications, flexibility, adaptability, you know, problem solving is a massive one. In smart cities, we are addressing problems or challenges of the city, and we're working with emerging technology. So in that, it is problem solving and it's emerging technology. And in emerging technology, there is uncertainty, and there's a lot of uncertainty in innovation. And with that, you need the ability to change and adapt. So you might be 2 weeks into a project, and then we realize that it's actually not what we should be doing at all, and you've got to be able to cut that loose and move on to the next thing, or completely pivot if needs be. You know, we work with a lot of entrepreneurs that, you know, will be, you know, working on something for 3, 4, 5 months, and then they realize, you know, this platform that they built that makes a lot of sense to them will never make any sense to the guy who manages flooding in the city, because they never spoke to him during the process. So they've got an opportunity there. They can just say, well, we built this, so you have to buy it, or they can listen to them, take 2 months out and redevelop it. And that ability to adapt and change on the spot is really important. I think communications is also really important, and I think this builds on what Gareth was saying there about relationships. And you know, if you suppose you've got to put yourself in the shoes of another that you're working with, would you, you know, in the way that you conduct yourself in the workplace, would you want to work with you? And you know, would you want to work with you going forward? And what people want, you want to, you know, I kind of have a general rule of thumb in everything that we do in Smart Docklands. We have huge amounts of stakeholders involved. So there's loads of different companies. We've residence groups, we've different tourism and hospitality groups, we've hotels. It's a very diverse bunch of people. But what we try to do is give more than we take. And as a basic principle, instead of asking for things for people all the time and expecting a lot of people, give a lot more, and you will be a more, I suppose, a more enjoyable person to work with, and you'll be a much better team player. And if you can be that team player with that problem solving ability, I think you'll certainly get far in today's working world.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Michael. I'm really glad to hear like all those skills that you've mentioned there. They are skills, you know, they're life skills, and they're skills that anybody taking on any kind of program, you know, as in a degree in some sort, can generate. I think, Gareth, you had mentioned you come from a psychology background, is it?
I've studied psychology in UCC.
Great. Okay. So yeah, it's just I wanted to point that out because the IT industry actually needs a lot more than the lone techie guy. You know, that's those days of the lone techie guy just hacking away on the computer. I think are well gone, and I'd love you guys are really dispelling that myth that the IT industry is about, you know, just that programmer. I'm thinking of I'm watching Designated Survivor on Netflix at the moment, and you've got the FBI, the geeky kind of techie guy sitting in, and they do have him in a basement programming away, hacking anything he can do, and so on. But it's not about this. This is a talk about, you know, the IT industry, and so far not one hard skill such as particular languages or anything has been mentioned. So that's great. That's brilliant, guys. I'll just say to the audience, please pop up your questions there, because it is for you guys. If you're wondering anything in particular, it's just up to you guys. Otherwise, I'll direct it in a way that I feel fit. But this webinar is for you. So please do ask the questions and we'll get to them. I'll get to them straight away. I'll get to them straight away. So we'll keep going. If you guys, I'm going to look back, looking back in your own journeys. If you are starting out now, so you experience as you are now, what advice would you give to your younger self, starting out, about to graduate? what advice would you give to yourself? So I'll go back to Gareth. We're going over and back here.
Yeah. So I would say, what would I tell myself? I would say to be more confident, right? But then to balance that confidence with how you come to the table has to be one of humility, I would say, right?
Yeah.
Like, be confident in your ability, be confident in what you can impact, be confident that what you bring to the table is more than enough. You are valid. You have a place at the table. You've earned that place based on what you bring, your skill sets, because that imposter thing is a thing, right? Like, I certainly went through that, right? I went through it when I public spoke. I went through it when it just be at a table and there's a whole load of more senior people there, and you feel like you shouldn't or can't or whatever talk, right? And that self-limitation is really pointless, actually, unnecessary, because you're there at the table because people value you, value your opinion, and so you gotta. I would say just try to, and this is not easily done, right? It requires practice and a bit of experience and a bit of self-awareness, and but try to tune in to the fact that you're there because of what you can bring, and your own. We spoke about diversity. It's your own set of skills and your own sets of experience and the way you think that is the value at the table, not because you're to tune into some idea of what we're all supposed to look like. My boss's boss actually speaks of the. She tells a funny story. She's the head of TA globally for Dell, right? So, like, a really, really big job, one step away from Michael Dell, essentially. And she speaks to, the way it used to be, say 10, 15 years ago, right? Where you walk into a room and there's a whole table of white males at the table, all probably dressed in either a gray or a navy suit or whatever it was, right? And she kind of said, like, that was the way it was, but we're not there anymore. We're at a place that realizes that it's not one particular style. You don't have to be any template, right? What the value is actually what you yourself brings to the table. And that was something that I certainly struggled with. Just in knowing that it was about me that brought the value, and I think a lot of people struggle with this. So what I would say in summary is to be, what I would say back to myself is, be confident that what you bring is enough, and it's more than enough, and that's the value. And so certainly bring that with a humility and an openness, right? Because that's the right way to behave, and that's the way you want to turn up, and it's the way that produces more positive outcome. But know that what you're meant to say at those tables is what you're meant to say, right? And so I think that's big. Be confident in what you can achieve, and let your commitment to your North Stars or your values or what you think is the right thing to do, let that drive you, instead of trying to fit a template. In terms of, the other thing that goes hand in hand with that, my own career, was, probably trying to keep everybody happy. And at some point I just went, you know what, that's actually not the point of this, right? The point is to, in a nice way, right? Again, I go back to my trail of blood, right? We don't want to leave trails of blood, but tune into the change that you're trying to create, and let that be your North Star, instead of trying to fit into a box too much, or be one particular style, or think you're supposed to say or whatever in a particular way. I would tend to just let all that go and let yourself come to the table, and the value that brings to the table is very significant, in my opinion.
Great. Thanks very much, Gareth. And I do know that the imposter syndrome really is a thing, isn't it? And especially if you feel in any way that you stand out, as you were saying, your boss's boss arriving in. And I'd be the same, being a woman in the tech industry. I was a programmer, and now I'm a software development lecturer. But being a woman in that space, you don't fit in as such. You're not, the regular type of person you see there. So it's very important to, you know, have that confidence and to lean in, as Sheryl Sandberg would say, lean in and sit at the table and so on. I do see questions coming in, and guys, I'll get to you in a sec. I'll just finish off it, Michael, with this part, and then I'll go to the questions. So Michael, have you anything else, your advice to your younger self?
Yeah, so I suppose my journey to this point, I've changed direction a lot of times, and I've been very flexible in that. Some might say taking too many changes. Certainly, my parents would have at a point in time, but you know, whenever I set out after school, my plan was to do pharmacy, and then I got into pharmacy and quite quickly changed to do accountancy and commerce in UCD. And my plan was then to become an accountant, and I did 1 year in Ernst & Young and realized that wasn't for me either. So I was ruling things out rather than focusing on what I did want to do, and sometimes that's just as valuable. But what I ended up doing then, I wanted to study innovation and entrepreneurship, and got an opportunity to work and help set up a thing called Startup Ireland. And out of that, it was kind of a 1 or 2 day a week thing, but I 1 or 2 days a month, and then it turned into 1 or 2 days a week, and then we got a lot of funding. We set up a thing called the Startup Gathering, and it all went very well. But in all of that, I suppose I followed my gut on what I wanted to do and things that interested me, and I kind of stuck to my guns with that. And I think a lot of you know, taking those opportunities along the way is really important. Now, in that, everything Gareth's just spoken about will definitely happen. There'll be imposter syndrome. You'll feel like, why am I here? Should I really be at this table? If you're at the table, it's definitely, you know, you're there on merit, and you're there for the right reasons. I think confidence and humility was a really important point from Gareth as well. You know, you don't want to be you know, over pushing it, as you know, in reality, especially when you're starting out in a career or just joining a team, you're not expected to know it all. So don't worry about not knowing it all. Be confident in what you do know and deliver that. And if you don't know some things, that's all right as well. You can ask questions, you can ask what is the next step, and as you go on, you start to realize that the person you're asking may or may not know as well. They'll either be making it up, or they'll ask their boss, or they'll be asking their boss. So I suppose, you know, there's a lot of you know, a term that people use nowadays is fake it till you make it. There's a lot of that going on, and you know, just having the confidence in what you're doing, in what you do know, and if you don't know things, have the confidence to ask the questions, I think is really important.
That's actually an extremely important point to make. Yeah, if you don't know, it's okay to say, I don't know, but I'll find out. And, you know, you go and find out, and that confidence in finding out rather than panic, you know, or whatever it is. Okay, I'm going to move to a few questions, and I'll start from the start, and I'll get through a few questions. So guys, the audience, again, pop in your questions here, and hopefully we'll get to all of these. So from Natasha, would you have any advice to someone who isn't young, has some experience, but has just received a new degree? Is that it? Yeah, so young, has experience and has received a new degree. I think you're probably in a good place to be. So you've probably a few years of experience behind you, and then went into the degree. So Gareth or Michael, either of you advice for Natasha?
Well, it's an interesting one, Anne, right? Because actually, last week we just completed what we call a returnee event, right? Which is exactly this, right? It was an event where we had 300 plus people on the call. It was a Dell held event, and basically it was trying to explore for people who want to return to work, who may have taken time off for any number of reasons, right? Maybe they were raising a family, maybe they were off traveling, maybe whatever. And so it was essentially to try and dispel any negativity associated with that gap, right? And so my first message would be, I can already tell from the tone that the person has, right, that they might perceive it as somewhat of a negative. And my first point would be, it's not a negative. It's actually, a lot of times it's a real positive, right? Because the experience that you've acquired when you're out, say for example, raising a family, is hugely valuable experience. And don't shy away from that. Don't undervalue that, or don't undersell that, right? It's just about framing it in a way that is productive and conducive to the point you're trying to get across in terms of the skill set you have. But what advice would I offer is pretty much the same as what I would offer to anybody, and the same of what I've already said, right? Be bring your humility for sure in terms of the things that you don't know and what you have to learn and so on and so forth. But be positive and be confident in your value and what you do bring to the table. And don't underestimate or undersell what that value is. Now that can take a little bit of practice, right? Like the first thing I would do with people is sit down and do a strength finder exercise to bring the person back to what are your core strengths and what is it you want to do and what do you come with and what do you bring to the table. And usually through that exercise, you realize that you come with a lot more than you think you do. But there is absolutely no negative to being, to use the terms here, right, younger or older. I've just spoken to the fact diversity is incredibly important. And so what you bring to the table from your perspective is the value, right? That's the point. That's what it all comes back to. So what advice would I offer? Bring your humility for sure, but be confident of your ability. Do maybe a bit of a strengths finder exercise to bring you back to what is the value that you bring to the table. And then be a little bit prescriptive around what is it you're after, right? You know, research some companies which fit my values, which fit my culture, what kind of roles would I like to do, and you know, then you can go on a journey of trying to ascertain. Don't just apply for any jobs. Do a little bit of research, find out what it is you want, and then start aiming yourself that direction. But do not undervalue your experience and what you bring to the table. And don't see the fact that you are a bit older than maybe most of the grads that you see around you. Don't let that be a negative. It is not a negative.
Absolutely, absolutely. Gareth, thanks very much for that. You just mentioned your Dell event. What was the name of that event? This is just my own interest. What did you call it?
We called it Networking Your Way Back to Work, I think was the name of the actual event.
Yeah. You know, I mean,
follow-ons incidentally, but it was about a week and a half ago, maybe.
Okay, very good. Very good. Yeah, and it's very important. Like I know, like from my point of view, I mean, I know it's probably not the audience's, being a mother of young kids, youngish kids, like a lot of my mates would be in the same situation. A lot of the mums down at the school had given up work for many years and they're trying to get back in. They'd have a degree but have given up work or they're working part-time. And now it's time to get back in as the kids are getting older and so on. And they would have that imposter syndrome, that confidence, lack of confidence and so on. Great, thanks. I'll move on. Let me see. Yeah, just looking at the time, Michael, I'll direct the next question to yourself. So, excuse me. Would you know, so excuse me, I should get this right. So this is from Caroline. So Caroline is asking, would you know how many other people are psychology, so with a psychology background in the tech industry? So Gareth, you'd mentioned you had a psychology background, but either Michael or Gareth, I suppose, it's a general question. Caroline is looking for other people with a psychology background in the tech industry. Are they there?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly, I mean, in reality, within the smart city space, you come across people from a very diverse bunch of backgrounds. So, you know, in our team, we have people who studied GIS, Geographical Information Systems. We have people who did accountancy. We have engineers, and we have people who studied social science, arts, a whole raft of different degrees. So, you know, we come across people who study everything, I suppose, and it's never hindered. And I think, you know, what Gareth has touched on plenty there is diversity, and at times it's diversity based on gender or age or background. It's and what really you're trying to get to there is diversity of thought. And diversity of thought comes from people from different backgrounds and different academic backgrounds. So there are plenty of people that I have come across that have studied a whole range of different degrees, and it's always been beneficial. The main thing I think has been a willingness to learn new things. So like at the minute, in the last couple of years, I've written a paper for the Irish government on 5G and around IoT, and that's been published just last year. I am not a telecoms expert. I am, and nor would I ever pretend to be, but I worked with people who are, and I'm you know, what I want to know, what I always want to learn is the new concepts and understand the industry that I'm working in. So you don't always have to be a subject matter expert. I suppose you just need to have the willingness and the appetite to learn about that industry and then apply your knowledge and your background to that industry.
Great, thanks, Michael.
Which goes back to the point, right, when we were talking about soft skills, we talked about the learning mindset and the willingness to be agile and be able to download information and apply it. And that's just exactly what Michael's shown there in a real life example. That's it in practice.
Yeah,
absolutely. And Caroline, you can, Caroline, so you probably, if you're psychology, you probably got an email from myself yesterday about this. You can simply drop me an email. Like, I have contacts of, you know, a lot of the graduates, the psychology graduates that are working in industry. I know one that's coming straight off is Jen. Jen works as a researcher, product researcher in Intercom, and Intercom is a really cool company in town. So Jen did the psychology degree. She did the technology path all right, but I don't actually think it would have mattered which path, excuse me, in the program she had done. She now works as a researcher, and she's one of their senior researchers. And I know, if you were at the last talk, Rich from Intercom, that was at the last talk, I know him well. And he says, you know, she gets on absolutely fantastic. You know, it is about her research and about those people skills and understanding who the users are and being able to get into the heads of these type of users, rather than there's no tech skills there needed. It is all about the research and understanding people. So if you want to drop me an email, Caroline, please do. And I can just show you a few LinkedIn profiles of our our graduates from the psychology degrees that got into the IT. Great, thanks.
Now, short answer to your question, Caroline, is yes.
Apologies, you know what? I actually realized it's not Caroline. Caroline Healy is the person posting all the questions to me. Apologies, I just see Caroline there. It doesn't matter, whoever it was to, anyway, all right? Somebody's wondering, I thought I asked that question. Okay, so Caelan, I know Caelan, I do indeed. Caelan is a third year in creative computing. And Caelan, he says, I'm wondering if there are any skills or projects I could work on over the summer that might make me stand out or serve me well when it comes to graduate at the end of fourth year. What would make a graduate stand out for you? So there we go. What would make a graduate? So yeah, we'll ask both of you again, I suppose.
Do you want me to kick off?
Yeah, you go, Michael.
Okay. So I suppose you know, I think what people want to see as best, you know, people who are hiring have realistic expectations. They don't expect you to have, you know, if they're hiring for a graduate role, it's not to have 10 years experience under your belt, but what they do want is a level of experience. So there are ways you can get that isn't necessarily always getting a fixed job. So, you know, whether if it's in a creative way, there's a lot of different I suppose there's loads of companies that are doing all types of really interesting things, be it in game development or augmented reality or virtual reality. There's a whole raft of things that are really interesting places to work at the minute. And you know, you can, as a graduate or a soon-to-be graduate, you can reach out to those companies and ask to work with them. You know, this summer there's always isolated projects that people can, or discrete projects that people can work on. So you know, it depends, and it's more challenging in a COVID environment. It certainly is, but in some ways we found that a little bit easier to hire graduates. So and hire interns even over the last year. So we've hired people that you know, we actually had somebody who joined the Smart Dublin team recently from Limerick, which would never have happened before. There's somebody in Maynooth who's joined the team, and there's also now somebody in Dingle who's joined the team. They're people that we never could have worked with before. So there are more opportunities now because people are working remote, and that will remain this summer. So if there are companies that you would like to work with at a point in time that you think that you could add a lot to, or that the types of places you would like to be in, offer to work with them, reach out to them. If they're larger companies, there may be a structured program such as a summer internship program. If they're smaller companies, have the ability to be a bit more flexible and agile, they may need somebody to help out on a project over the summer. And then when it gets to, you know, after whatever it is, June, July, August time, come September, you have 3 months experience working with the company. It may be paid, it may not. You know, most good companies will pay you for your work. So you know, what you'd want at the end of that is on your CV, you've experience working with a company, but then you've also had an opportunity to prove yourself to one of the companies that you would like to work with. So I think certainly if you can at all, reach out to companies and work on a project with them. Don't, you might not necessarily need a job for 3 months or 6 months, and it might not need to be fixed. If somebody needs a bit of help, or a company needs some help on a project that might only be 1 or 2 days a week, don't shy away from it. You can do that as well. And the one other thing that I would maybe just mention is, build a portfolio as well. So there's loads of, really, depending on what your skill set is, there's loads of good opportunities to demonstrate the things that you have worked on. And I, and a separate thing that I'm involved in, have hired a lot of UX UI designers and augmented reality designers recently, and they, the ones that have the Dribble portfolios or their own website or other things, or even GitHub, to demonstrate the things that they've worked on, they're the people that you spark more interest in. So, increase your online presence. You may need a website, you may not need a website, but certainly have profiles on, be it Dribble or Sketchfab or LinkedIn or the different places. Whatever your skill set is, there's opportunities to demonstrate your work there. So get it up there and let people see you.
Great, thanks, Michael. I'm getting messages in here that we need to keep finish up. So maybe I'll ask for one-line answers to these, and we'll finish up, because I know there's more people getting in and so on. So once again, another psychology student saying, right, if I want to get into the tech industry, okay, there's the soft skills. Are there any hard technology skills you'd recommend learning?
I think like basic ones like Excel, PowerPoint, Word, the ability, to present data or present a story to influence a particular situation, right? These kind of hard skills are always fairly universal. Obviously, it depends on what role you want to apply for, right? If you want to be a coder, then you need certain background in terms of engineering or code, I would say. But I guess the point I'm making is that there are certain skills that may be tickets to entry, right? Which may be hard skills. If you want to be an accountant, you probably need ACCA or something, right? But on top of that, the distinguishing skills are really the soft skills that we've talked about in terms of learning on top. Trying to be as concise as I can.
Yeah, and yeah, sorry about this, guys. I realize it can go on forever. I'll just say to psychology students again, drop me a line, and even if it's a conversation with myself, because I think I said in the email that I was program chair of the psychology degree. I know he is inside out, even though you have never met me. I know the program inside out, and I know where we're going with, I was part of writing that program, creating the program, how we designed it to how you fit into the IT industry. And it really isn't about the hard skills, even though you do learn them just to get used to that scale of learning. It's about you as a psychologist. You're still a psychologist. You know the users, you know how to research, you know all that stuff. But do drop me an email if you want to chat, even if it's with a group of the psychology students. Jody, very quickly, and then we'll have to finish up. So Jody here says, I hope to do a master's in UX as soon as I graduate. I'm afraid in case I should be spending more time after graduating, gaining industry experience rather than educational experience. Any advice?
I suppose, you can always try to gather a little bit of experience elsewhere. So there's loads, and I don't know how Gareth feels about this, but certainly in the companies that I work with, having a little bit of a portfolio there. So there's obviously Dribble and Behance and other platforms you can put things on, but to get experience while you're doing that, you can work on platforms like Fiverr that you will get small tasks that you can work with maybe 5 different companies, show off your work, and ask them, can you put them on your portfolio? So I suppose while you're if you can balance the two, obviously balancing the two and getting your educational experience is important, but if you can, don't think about taking on experience outside of education as taking on a big job. You can always do freelance style work through freelance websites, which will build up a portfolio.
And I think if you go back to the idea again of building out your network, right? Like LinkedIn is a great tool. We can all be connected at the blink of an eye. So like it's completely feasible that you can reach out to people within those companies and research and ask, hey, you can get mentors, you can get advocates on the back of developing those relationships, and on the back of that, you can potentially create opportunities to work on a project or maybe get a 3-month internship in a particular company. It starts with being willing to, as we said at the beginning, to lean in, to develop relationships, to ask questions, to ask for help, to ask for advice. When you start leaning in, you'd be amazed at the amount of output that comes from that approach, I would say, right? But to Michael's point, like, be flexible and adaptable, right? It might be an internship. It could be that we've reached out to somebody on LinkedIn to get a particular opportunity. It might be a project-based type thing. It can come in varied forms, but be open to it. And most importantly, the common denominator here is attitude is king. So anything that shows your application of your attitude, right? More even than the experience that you're going to gain in those 3 months, the fact that you have the appetite and the motivation to get up and get after something and try to gain experience in a particular area speaks to your attitude and your conviction and your commitment. And that is king over any hard skill that you're potentially going to get, right?
Yep.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Right, guys, I think I'll just double, I know I should be reading more questions. I don't think there's anybody there asking more questions, although, you know, I don't want to leave anybody short. Guys, I'll just, on behalf of all the audience here, I know you can't, we can't see them and talk to them directly. So Gareth and Michael, I can't thank you enough. That was absolutely fantastic. Your insight into this really is valuable. Like we can say it as a lecturer, as a teacher, I can say it over and over again, but till they hear it from people out in industry about all these soft skills, about communicating, about networking and so on, how important they are. And that word pivot was used in there. It's kind of one of these buzzwords that's used now, isn't it? Because we've all, you know, adaptability and pivoting, because we've all had to do it in the last year. It's been so important to change whatever we're doing, to pivot and do it in some different way, adapt in some different way. So yeah, I just want to say thank you very much. Thanks to the audience for logging in. I hope it was useful. You can always drop me an email. It's Anne Wright, ANNE.WRIGHT@IADT.ie even, excuse me. Yeah, apart from that, thank you very much, guys.
Great. Thanks very much.
Very welcome. Thanks, guys. Hope it was useful.
Okay.